Hi, I'm Paul Guggenheimer, and I grew up playing hockey and idolizing professional hockey players. And then, when I was in high school, I saw the movie Slapshot for the first time. Seeing that movie was like a rite of passage. It changed my outlook not only about hockey, but about life in general, with its larger-than-life characters. Aging player-coach Reggie Dunlop, portrayed by Paul Newman. And of course, the Hanson Brothers, played by two guys named Carlson and Dave Hanson, who portrayed Jack Hanson and also inspired the character of Dave Killer Carlson. Well, this year, Slapshot is celebrating its 40th anniversary. And we sought out Dave Hanson, who runs this hockey rink here in Pittsburgh, to ask him about the movie, what it was like to make it all these years later. His office is downstairs. Come on. There he is, Dave Hanson. How you doing, Hanson, brother?
Hey, Paul. Good to see you, buddy.
Likewise, good to see you.
Obviously, you're a goalie. I can see the big light going between your legs as you're walking up.
Big 5-hole, what can I say? Hey, you want to talk about Slapshot for a little while?
Oh, anytime.
All right, this your office here?
It's right over here.
Moving up in the world,
Yeah,
aren't you?
that's
All right,
right.
okay.
I'm telling you, he jumped us. I mean, gloves off, stick down, no warning. He challenged the Chiefs. Call his name. Call his name. But Dave was there. Dave's a killer. Yeah, Dave's a killer. Dave's a mess. Okay, but Dave's out. Who's gonna take his place? Is the answer Jesus? Okay, guys. Show us what you got.
So can you believe it's been 40 years since you made Slapshot?
You know, it really doesn't. And one of the reasons is because the Hanson Brothers continue to travel literally the world and constantly get reminded by old fans of the 70s and new fans of Slapshot. And everybody has their favorite lines, their favorite stories. They all remember the first time they saw it, who they were with, where they were at. It certainly doesn't seem like yesterday, but it doesn't seem like 40 years ago.
How did you end up being cast in Slapshot?
What I tell people is the movie is based on more fact than fiction. It was based on a team that I was playing for in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, called the Johnstown Jets in 1974-75. And pretty much everything that goes on in the movie, maybe with the exception of the striptease, happened in one form or fashion. There was three brothers playing for us. They were big, tough, wore glasses, named Jeff, Jack, and Steve Carlson. There was a fellow on the team that was called Dave Killer Hanson, i.e. me. And then all the other characters on the team or on the other teams were either real characters of the game or a combination of characters of the game. So when Nancy Dowd, who was the sister of one of the players on the team, came down and started following us around and wrote the script, obviously they wrote in the three brothers and the killer and a few other people. And when they got around to making the film and casting for the film, they wanted to get actors like Nick Nolte, Peter Strauss, and a group of Hollywood actors to play these roles. Of course, because you had Paul Newman, the #1 actor at the time of Hollywood, and Strother Martin, and other main characters. So they wanted to really have this cast of actors. Well, these guys could not skate. No matter how they tried to give them lessons and took them out in hockey practices and hired private instructors, and they just couldn't get them skate well enough to make it look like a professional game. So Nancy basically said, why don't we go back and let these guys be themselves and see if that would work out. And basically that's what happened. They came back to Johnstown, they being the Hollywood, George Rahal, the director, and Nancy and a few others, and sat the Carlson brothers down and sat myself down, and we read a few lines in the script, and they shook their heads, and yet they still took a shot at us and pretty well casted us. And so it was going to be Jeff, Jack, and Steve Carlson were going to be the Hanson brothers. Dave Killer Hanson was going to be Dave Killer Carlson, but Jack ended up going to Edmonton Oilers to play when we got around to filming, so they just plucked me out of the Carlson role and threw me in as a Hanson brother, and we were off and running, or off and skating, I should say.
Did you have any previous acting experience at all?
When we got first stuck in front of the camera and were told to act and were given lines, we really were bad. We were robotic, and it took a couple times, and you could see where George Roy Hill was getting frustrated. It finally got to the point where George said, let's stop for a minute, take a breath, and pull this aside. He says, okay, boys, this doesn't seem to be working too well. He says, so let's try a different angle. What would you do in this situation? You know, you'd set it up, and we'd say, I don't know, we would just react. We would probably just spew something off. He said, well, let's give that a try. You know, you got your lines, you know what the scene is, you know what the atmosphere is, and let's just kind of roll with that. So next shot, we did, and we pulled it off. We kind of ad-libbed some stuff and threw in the regular stuff, and he just says, that's great, don't change it. That's the way we'll roll from now on. So it really boiled down to, quite frankly, that we were acting, but we weren't acting. The Carlson Brothers and I lived together for 2 years. And we're from Minnesota, and we're on the bus every day of our professional careers, and we're hanging out on our off days, and we're playing with our slot cars, you know, on the third floor of the room. So you develop a rapport and kind of adopt each other's, you know, personalities. The actors were the one acting. The hockey players or ourselves were just being ourselves. So to answer your question, it was very easy, because all they did was, the only thing they changed about me was they put a pair of glasses on me. Everything else was me, and we pretty much just had fun doing what we were doing and being ourselves.
This movie was made before North Dallas 40, before Bull Durham and Major League, before even The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. Did you have any sense as you were doing this that you were making an iconic sports film?
We were 20, 21, 22 years old in that order, the three of us. And when they first came to us and they said, hey, would you guys like to do a movie? We said, well, how long is it going to take? It's going to take 2-3 months. Through your summer. Well, we were used to taking our summers off, going back to Minnesota, playing softball all summer long, drinking beer, and getting ready for training camp in the fall. So it's like, okay, well, why not? Let's give this a try. So we had no idea. For us, it was just an opportunity to drink a lot of beer, have free food, get paid for doing something, and, you know, meet Paul Newman, and hopefully meet some chicks, and hopefully have some fun doing it. So we had no clue, even to the point where before the film came out, Universal Studios came back to us and offered us a 7-year, 7-movie contract deal. They wanted to have us do movies over the next 7 years, because they obviously saw something that was coming together they thought was pretty cool, and we were pretty unique, and they already had a script written, and we said, nah, we want to be hockey players, we don't want to be actors. So there's an indication of how smart we were. And we shot it down. So we had no concept at all. You know, we shot for 3 months and then went on to pursue our professional hockey careers.
What was it like the first time you met Paul Newman?
I was having a pregame nap in my apartment, and there's knocking going on the door. And it wakes me up, and there's knocking still going on. I go, what the, you know, so I open the door, and I'm in my underwear and in my dirty sweat socks, and I just open the door, and I go, what? Well, it was steps up to my apartment level, so down below on the lower step, there's a guy looking up at me, and I'm yelling, what? And he looks up and he says, you Dave Hanson? I says, yeah. And he says, I'm Paul Newman. And I go, oh, yeah, you are. Hey, Paul. And like I said, I'm standing in my underwear. I says, yeah, well, you are, Paul. He says, yeah. He says, geez, did we wake you? And I says, well, yeah, kind of. And he says, well, you know, and then he apologized. And I said, you know, I'm going, oh, no problem. I says, what's up? He says, well, I got some, you know, art director with me and a couple couple movie guys, set guys, and they want to come in and take a look at a hockey player's apartment. We want to see what it looks like. Do you mind if we come in? And I says, Paul, I got no problem as long as you let me go back to bed, you know, and just stay out of my bedroom. You can do whatever you want. So
Paul Newman's in your house, and you go back to bed?
I'm going back to bed. And so he said, before I went, he says, yeah, no, we'll be quiet. We just want to look around, take some pictures and some Polaroids. And then he says, but hey, Dave, he says, you got any beer in the fridge? I said, yeah, what's up? He says, well, the race is on. He says, I'd like to maybe crack a beer and sit down and watch the race with these guys. He says, nah, no problem. Drink as much as you want. TV's in there. Go for it. So that was the first meeting of Paul, which was the start of a very good and long friendship.
This film has a lot of profanity. It has nudity. Were you concerned at all about how that was going to play after this movie was released?
Never did, because there was nothing foreign to us about it. It just all seemed natural. And keep in mind, when you say the nudity, the only nude scene is Newman and Hanrahan's wife, Suzanne, in the bed. And the funny story behind that is that was a closed set, and they kind of did that secretly. And I think they did it up at the Johnstown Armory. And we caught wind, we being, of course, me and the other Carlson brothers, caught wind that they were doing that. And it was kind of like a day off for us. So we said, come on, let's go crash it, right? So we grabbed our beer and we kind of went up. Well, they had armed guards because they knew we were coming. They had armed guards outside of the doors and wouldn't let us in. So luckily, we still had fun. We got one of the guards to allow us to get onto a tank and drive the tank around a little bit, But so really, it was the language, that it was not out of character. That's the way the talk was. And when the movie came out, you talk about a film that was ahead of its time. I think it set the record for F-bombs. And the other thing being that it was written by a female, just kind of set Hollywood and all these critics on edge, because it was, you hate to say it, but it was cutting edge material now, looking back, and they weren't ready for it. So there was, I think, quite a bit of an argument about whether it should be rated X or whether it should be rated R, because it almost initially got rated X. And I think they had a pretty big argument about it not being X and finally got an R rating. At that time, again, you're talking, 1976.
Did you have the sense, as you were making this, that you were creating a classic sports film?
We're hockey players, had no concept of the movie and no concept of how they were piecing things together, although I think they tried to shoot it chronologically according to the script. We had no idea. The only thing we ever really saw on what we were doing was the dailies. And there again, as an indication of how relaxed this whole process became for the people that were in the industry. They would take what we shot in the day, they would send it off to New York, get the film process, and then send it back where the director, the editor, Paul Newman, sometimes his wife would come in, and they would sit and watch the dailies that night, like going through whatever we shot. Well, we found that out one time. And so we kind of snuck into the back room, we being, again, I say we, when I say collectively we, it's usually the Hanson Brothers, and then we grab a couple of the other actors, and we started watching from the back without them knowing we were there. So then we thought, and we saw a couple of the screw-ups, we'd have the accidental screw-ups, and hey, that's pretty funny. So then we'd start doing screw-ups on purpose, or we'd start, doing, so we could get outtakes. And then we suddenly, the next thing you know, we crashed the dailies with beer and popcorn and snacks, and we give them to Paul and George. So that suddenly, all of a sudden, it kind of became a big party, although they're watching these, on a business aspect, from an educated eye and what we can do. So we used to do that regularly. So quite frankly, it wasn't until we went to the premiere in New Haven at Yale University, of all places, did we see the first full feature film and get an idea of how they put it all together and what it really was.
What do you remember about how the audience initially reacted to this film?
Really what we were hearing more than anything was the reviews in the hockey community. We were, you'd see in hockey news or you hear, you're watching TV or something, and you would hear the GMs of the teams or the commissioner of the league would say, that movie's a disgrace, it doesn't portray hockey. And then of course you'd hear the players saying, That's absolutely right on. You know, it's the way it is. You know, obviously a little satirical about it, but that's the way it is. So we didn't really have much of a sense or care what the critics said, and quite frankly, we went right on and continued like I said, our hockey career. So you know, back then it was only shown in theaters. Typically, it'd go through the circuit in theaters, and you know, and a month later it was on a shelf somewhere, and then the next movies would go through. So it was short-lived. It didn't bother us. In fact, we would have more fun than anything, because now we'd go into arenas to play a hockey game. And I'll use Dallas as an example. I went into Dallas where they hated me, and I always got booed, you know, in warm-ups and this and that. So typically I'm skating around in warm-ups one time, and I'm hearing the booing, and finally I look up, and there's an entire section of fans up there with the glasses and the fake nose and holding the Charlestown Chiefs Booster Club, and it was just hilarious. So everybody started having a good time with it. I'd face off against an opponent that we'd fight all the time, and he'd look at me, and I look at him, he'd say, "Buy a soda after the game." You know, so it was good stuff.
And the critics came around, didn't they?
They did, and the one that I think of mostly is Siskel and Ebert on David Letterman's show, and I think the question was something like, David to Siskel and Ebert, is there ever a movie that you watched, critiqued, and then later on you kind of went back and realized you made a mistake on? And they said, absolutely, Slapshot. He says, when we first saw Slapshot, you know, we gave it a thumbs down. Later on, looked at it closely and realized, you know, what a great film that was. And those guys were the biggest movie critics at the time. So, you know, I think that was a pretty good example of how that movie, like you said, started out with mixed reviews, and now it's historically always in the top 10 of the best sports movies of all time.
What's your favorite scene in Slapshot?
Probably one of the more fun ones was in the hotel room playing with the race set. When Newman comes walking by and we're playing with our race cars, and he pokes his head in and he says, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" You know, kind of. Again, that's based on truth. We all lived in the same house, we being, again, the Hanson brothers, the Carlson brothers, myself, and the guy that played Pretty Boy, Charlebois in the film, Guido Tenise. We all lived together. So on our days off, we would move all the furniture aside, we'd set up the racetrack, and we would play race cars all day long. So they took that and put it in the movie. So that was kind of a little bit of an ad-lib at the end, where, you know, Steve keeps running around, and I say, you know, "You broke the darn car, I'm not playing anymore," and I threw it. You know, that was pretty funny.
Why do you suppose that 40 years later, we're still talking about Slapshot? It's still such a popular film.
It's incredible. People ask me why. Why do I think it has such staying power? And you know, like I said, we continue to travel the world and meet people from the 70s, you know, that now are the golden age, and to little ankle biters. That this movie has been passed on through generations and is still hilarious. And I say because it's got everything a man wants. It's got sex, it's got violence, it's got foul language, and there's nothing politically correct about it.
After you made Slapshot, you went on to play professional hockey in the National Hockey League. As you were making the movie, you were in the midst of the beginnings of a minor league career. You played for several seasons, and it's taken a toll on your body. You're days away from having a hip replacement surgery. How would you describe the price that you've had to pay physically to be a professional hockey player?
I have paid a price. You know, when you're young, you're indestructible, and you know, there's even at the lowest rung of the ladder in the minor leagues that Slapshot was portrayed about and was written about in real life. You had your role players. You had your skilled players that had a finesse game and didn't play real physical, and then you had your physical players that were maybe less skilled, but you know, did the grinding work in the corners and had to drop the gloves, you know, more than one occasion. Back then it was every game, it seemed, but and that was my role, and that was my role right through my professional career. So I was a very physical player, you know, and I fought a lot was the enforcer on, I was either the enforcer on the home team or the goon for the other team. With the bus rides and the travel and the style of play and the length of time, I played 10 years professional hockey. You know, it now in my in my 60s, it's paying I'm paying a price for it now. You know, concussion is now, concussion awareness is now real big on the radar in professional sports. Back then it wasn't, you know, and so I can, you know, the joke is, you know, how many concussions did you have? And I can't remember. But, you know, I've had concussions, and I have a concern, you know, if it will ever affect me, or at what degree is it affecting me now. But, you know, the immediate issues I'm dealing with now are joints. And I've got a hip replacement coming in. I had elbow surgery a few months ago. You know, fortunately my knees are still holding up, and the back has issues, neck has issues. But it's a price that I paid and I would pay again, because I just love playing the game, especially during a time when it was a lot of fun and there was a lot of characters and personality in the game that just made it a lifetime experience for me.
What was life like for you after you made this movie?
What it's done is it's allowed me to do a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have been able to do without Slapshot. I've traveled to Germany, I've traveled to Australia, I've traveled from coast to coast in North America as a Hanson brother, and meet a lot of people, have a lot of fun, help in raising a lot of money for good causes and charitable needs and foundations and stuff like that. And I've had a blast. And I get to still wear long hair and look like I'm still living in the 70s, which was the best time of my life. You know, and I'm sitting here talking to you, which never would have happened.
Dave Hanson, thanks for spending some time with us and for making such a great movie.
It's always a treat to talk to old goaltenders, so anytime, Paul.